Now, late yesterday, I put the next project on iCollege. If any of you happen to look at it, I have 5 different online sources. 3 of them that go one way on the issue that I'm dealing with, 2 of them go the other. But your job, this time there'll be no rewrites. I got to reading all of you who rewrote my paper, and it was the same old over and over again. I thought, hey, this is kind of monotonous for me. So the next project will be, you will write the paper based on the topic I picked. You don't have to do any research, even though if you do want to do outside research, that's fine. There's about 15 or 20 pages there to read. Have any of you seen it yet? I pushed it late last night. You're looking it up right now? Okay. The topic is the city of Mohenjo-Daro, but it won't be due for a while. Again, this is a matter where that you have to pick and choose what do you believe. And as I say in my instructions, what you believe about it will depend on what you believed in advance in a lot of cases. But I have had some students tell me that after doing some research, they've changed their opinions about a lot of things. All right. More of you will probably arrive in a minute. Oh, before the class is over, one of the girls from my other class is going to come in here to take the map pass test because she can't make it at 2 o'clock or 2:30. So be expecting to see some unusual face here somewhere along about 9:15 or 9:30 or so. Yes.
Okay, so we're looking for the next project.
Yeah.
So basically, you just want us to take the information that you have and put that into like a research type paper.
There's five online sources there, 5 web pages, and from there you don't have to do any more research. Just use those as sources. And make a paper out of it.
Okay, so this would be like normal research.
It'll be research paper, but yeah, I've done a lot of your research for you, if not all of it.
Yeah.
You just need to read the articles and then decide for yourself what do you think happened to Mohenjo-Daro. But again, don't rewrite what my instructions. I mean, this is different. It's not a rewrite. Now, okay. Now that most of you are here, I'll make the same speech that I gave to the other class, except maybe this speech might be a little bit harder. I was a little bit disappointed in the papers. Most of you took my line of reasoning, which hopefully you all know or should know by now. What I wrote in the paper, I do not, and I repeat, I do not actually believe. There were a couple of you. Now, the one person is not here right now, but there's one of you who simply said that my paper was a bunch of jumbled ideas that didn't even have a real thesis. That person got a really high mark. It was a bunch of jumbled ideas that didn't really have a thesis. Might have been yours, I'm not sure. Might have been yours. But another person had some ideas that I didn't even have. That person is not here right now, but that mythologies were what made the ancient peoples. They could not do without them. We need some kind of mythologies to give us a worldview to connect us with each other. All right, these stories, and a lot of people are concerned about them. The stories that you might have run into in your childhood about Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a fall. They used to be taught to every American boy and girl and every European boy and girl, and had been for more than 2,000 or 3,000 years. It is like these stories connected us with each other and connected us, made us part of the human race. And if we don't teach these to the next generation, we disconnect it. And I thought, hey, that was a really, really good way of looking at it. The mythologies, without them, these people's mindset might have just gone chaotic. We have to, as much as possible, have something about us that we all have in common as far as a belief system. It might be a wrong belief system, but nevertheless, it gives us some kind of a commonality. All right. Now, folks, this might sound a little bit harsh to some of you, but I think it needs to be said. More than 32 years ago, a younger brother of mine asked me, well, what if you marry someone and find out that this person was not as intelligent as you thought she was? If someone were to ask that question to you, what kind of answer do you think you'd give? The fact is, you can tell someone's intellectual level in no more than 5 minutes of conversation with them. With very, very few exceptions. Whether they have the intelligence or not will show up. The quality of the paper that I wrote, folk, was written on a what I would call a below average intellectual level. I did that deliberately and purposefully. Some of you, a few of you, turned it into a high quality paper. My congratulations to you. Most of you just tried to rehash what I did and simply did not change what I said, and I have to say I was disappointed. Now, all right, I want to say a few things about the paper. There was a case where the 3 or 4 sentences in a row began with the same prepositional phrase, in addition, in addition, in addition. Do any of you know better than that? You don't begin the same 3 sentences in a row with the same words. In addition, in addition, that. I discussed with a fellow faculty member. No, we don't do it. Now, some of you caught that and changed it very well, where some of you rewrote the whole thing. Now, something now that about, for instance, Thor hitting his hammer on his eaten up oxen and coming back to life. Before you think that sounds fetched, there are experiments going on right now to restore the woolly mammoth, not by touching with a hammer, but by simply reviving the DNA as much as we can collect from the woolly. So you're aware of it. And the dinosaur also.
They like apparently cloned it.
They cloned a woolly mammoth,
Yeah.
but it did not live long.
It didn't. It lived like 3 days. I think.
Yeah, but they cloned a baby woolly mammoth. They grew it in the body of an elephant, the elephant being the woolly mammoth's nearest living relative. But they actually cloned a woolly mammoth. They are attempting to do that again. This experiment was done some 30 years ago. It lived a very short life. Today we have better methods probably of keeping them alive. Well, we do have better methods than they did. But from something like bones, if they had the right science, it can be done for them. It's not as fetched as it may sound. We have cloned sheep, for the most famous case being a sheep named Dolly. There are problems, though, with it, but we have successfully cloned a few animals. It's rare that it works when it works, and we don't know why it doesn't always work. Anyway, leaving that. Now, folk, the idea that Venus popped out of the head of Jupiter. There are persons who believe that a solar system-wide catastrophe occurred. I mean, if you know anything about the solar system, the planet Uranus is tilted on its side. Unlike the other planets where they have a north and a south, maybe slightly tilted like the Earth is, the planet Uranus is tilted 90 degrees on its side. Any of you know what I'm talking about? It indicates that Uranus underwent a big disaster one time. It's something, in other words, they're saying something came through the solar system that tilted Uranus, crushed, destroyed, or exploded a planet between Mars and Jupiter, which is why we find more than 1 million asteroids. By the way, asteroids will be making news next month. We have a satellite that's supposed to fly close by Ceres, the biggest asteroid in the system, in March next month. But along the way, it is believed by some that Venus was once a moon of Jupiter. And when this planet passed, or part of a star, part of a nova, or whatever, passed through the solar system, it stole Venus from Jupiter and carried Venus deeper inside the solar system. And what the ancients saw, they would have seen Jupiter as being a pretty bright star. I mean, if you look at Jupiter, you only see the planet Jupiter. You don't see its 4 moons unless you look at it with even a pair of small binoculars to show its moons. But they saw Venus as they saw Jupiter as one body, and all of a sudden it would seem like something broke away from that body, and they watched it, and eventually it assumed its present orbit far inside the orbit of the Earth. In other words, they were actually observing a phenomenon where that Venus might have broken away, or appeared to have broken away from Jupiter. A lot of persons believe that the ancients actually observed this. Now, again, none of you have caught on to that or did the research. The point I'm trying to make, folk, is these people, all right, you read their writings, they had a high level of intelligence. The man I'll be talking about today was Socrates and Plato. You can read his writings, and I even in reading them translated from Greek to English, and you'll decide, or at least I decide, these men had a very high level of intelligence. They were not primitive. Yes.
This might be a dumb question.
Go ahead.
But did they know about the planets and they named the planets like Jupiter, Mars, or did we name the planets after the Roman gods?
They named them. That's an extremely important question. They named them. They believed. All right, if you look up Jupiter in Encyclopedia today, they'll have one entry for the planet and another entry for the god. They did not know the difference. The god and the planet are one and the same. Yeah.
Then they knew like about those planets like Jupiter that we know as Jupiter today.
It was the same Jupiter, as far as we can tell, yes, the same planet.
So they knew like Mercury, Venus.
All right, they knew of Mercury, and then, all right, Mercury was the messenger god. Mercury had wings on his feet, and Mercury is the fastest moving planet in the solar system. And they knew it was a fast moving planet. Venus, second fastest moving planet in the solar system, named after, because Venus had a very white look about it, named after beauty. The brightest star in the heavens, exceeded only by the moon and the sun. The next brightest is Venus, and then Jupiter is next. And Mars, a bright red planet, they named it after blood, the god of war. And then Jupiter had a kingly blue, purplish, kings generally wear purple, but had a blue look about it. And I've looked at Jupiter. In fact, just recently, Jupiter made news because it was so close to the moon. Anyway, had somewhat of a majestic look, named a king. Then Saturn, a very slow-moving planet, because Saturn was an old, old man. Yes?
Do you believe in like aliens or like?
What's that?
Do you believe in like other life on other planets?
Okay. Somewhat yes and no. Let me tell you. This might not be the appropriate forum to discuss it. I believe that something happened back there. All the ancients did. Now, whether it was fallen angels or what we might call demons, and what we're talking about, well, I did talk about demons in the end of last lesson. Whether it be fallen angels, demons, or spirit entities, the ancients believed that they came to earth, lived among them, lived in their temples, were capable even of being killed, and cohabited with earth women and produced a race of hybrids. Now, either these people were completely ignorant or zany, or they knew something we don't. Again, yeah, all right, go ahead. Yeah, okay.
So this is kind of a follow-up to that question. So how did they know about those planets without having the technology that we have today, like telescopes?
You can see them with your unaided eye. All right, they would watch the stars. They studied the stars, and notice that some stars move from one. All right, if you look at the stars, you'll see the same constellation with the same stars staying in the same place. But some of these stars move from one constellation to another every night. The moon moves. I mean, from one so they knew the moon was a mover. But the word planet means wandering stars. So they knew that these were planets. And we'll talk later about how they tried to envision a universe with the Earth at the center, which became the dominant view of our universe for 1,800 years. And they pictured the Earth as the center, and the sun and moon going around the Earth every day, and all the solar system and the stars going around. Because, again, Albert Einstein said that all motion is relative. So from the point of view of an observer on Earth, it appears that the stars are moving across the sky every night. I mean, you watch a star, if I can look at it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it might be coming over the horizon, watch that same constellation of stars at 3 o'clock in the morning, it will have moved most of the way across. At 6 o'clock in the morning, it'll be setting in the western sky. They all come up in the east and set in the west.
Literally the craziest thing.
Huh?
It's crazy.
It's like,
It's
well,
like the sun also, like, you know how it's just it's of course the hottest thing in existence, I think.
rises
It's
in
just,
the...
it's just crazy how far it is, and it's keeping us at like a good temperature.
If we were any closer,
It's a wild.
we'd burn up. If we were any farther away, we'd freeze to death. The Earth orbits every 24 hours. If it went any faster or slower, we'd burn up today and freeze to death. If the moon were any closer to us, the tides would overwhelm us and we'd have a global flood every day.
Yeah.
If the moon were any farther away, it would not create tides. And the result is our oceans become... The tides is what keeps the ocean clean. The water moving through all that sand and gravel keeps the ocean clean. Without the tides, folk, the ocean becomes dirty, filthy, and stagnant. Now, about the flood story. I think all of you might have guessed. I strongly believe it. It shows up not only in every ancient mythology, it also shows up in our DNA. Our DNA tells us that there was some kind of disaster somewhere that left everybody dead except for one man and his sons, his family. That's written in our DNA. That's why our mitochondrial Eve is older than DNA, the male DNA for Adam, that all humans today are descended from. So it's written in our DNA, but also we are learning. I mean, we were told that fossils took millions of years to form. We are now learning that fossils form in an instant when there was a disaster. We're observing some big volcanic eruptions, and they will turn living things into fossils rather quickly. The fact that we have so many fossils, you maybe realize this from Ohio, like I am, and go visit a creek bed. The creek bed is just loaded with fossils. I mean, even your science, you don't even want any more of. The students bring them in, I mean, just loaded with fossils all over the creek bed. Some of you might know a little bit of what I'm talking about. But also coal. We have enough coal to last us 3,000 years. Tar, natural gas, all this, fossils, created by a sudden worldwide catastrophe, apparently, and not formed over periods of millions of years. We have fossilized jellyfish. Well, jellyfish decay in a matter of 3 or 4 hours. The fact that you have a fully formed fossilized jellyfish shows that it was fossilized the instant it died. Yes?
The thing with jellyfish and a lot of other salt matter, I forget there's a term for it, but what actually happens is, say a jellyfish would be buried instantly.
Yes.
And the jellyfish would rot, and the cavity would be left.
Yeah.
And then minerals seep into that cavity.
Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. But I'm not sure. I mean, there's 2 or 3 ways of forming imprints of what once was alive. And what you're talking about is one way. The city of Pompeii had human imprints made the same way. Minerals would seep in, leave the imprint, and sometimes even shows a facial expression of people who perished. And by the way, with your next project, you can mention Pompeii if you wish. Anyway, that's one way that the jellyfish could be fossilized, by being buried in a cavity. If they didn't die, eventually other minerals would come in, seep in, and replace the. Yeah.
This is super off topic, but why does this happen? Like, I don't get it.
Why does this?
Why is everything so perfect for us to live in? Like, why are we that distance from the sun?
It depends on your worldview. Is the best answer I can give here in the state
like a
college.
religious question?
That's an extremely good question. Extremely important. And again, what you believe depends on what you have chosen as your worldview, or what you will choose as your worldview. Yes?
Do you think it might have something to do with natural conditioning? Like, we naturally condition ourselves for the environment?
In other words, the environment was here, and then we just naturally conditioned ourselves after the environment was placed here for us. You can believe that if you wish. The evidence is such that it's up to you to choose what you believe. There's evidence for either side. I mean, there's big controversy going on called the creation-evolution controversy. There was a big debate on that 12 months ago, February 4th of last year. They had a debate on national TV. Actually, it was on the internet about it, and multiplied millions of people watched it. The evidence can go either way. You don't have to believe, actually, you don't even have to believe the Earth is millions of years older than the universe. But you can believe that the Earth was created roughly 6,000 years ago, based on scientific evidence. The evidence is subject, folks, to interpretation. You don't think so?
No, I mean, I'm saying it's crazy.
It might be. If the evidence is subject to you can interpret it the way you choose. Our existence is crazy. We actually, by natural processes, should not even exist. But hey, we're here. Now, brings me to my next point that nobody seemed to catch on to. But when I was at my sister's house, my brother-in-law, my sister's wife, had a book there. and I opened it, thinking it was about the Tower of Babel, but it was not at all about the Tower of Babel when I opened it up. But it had one line in the book. This man was hard against teaching any form of religion to youngsters, particularly Christianity. I mean, he was really hard. He said, the Christian Bible teaches that all humans came from dust. And we don't want that taught to our children. Well, folk, when you come right down to it, when life dies, what does it become? Dust. What then are we made of to begin with? You may not like hearing it or thinking, but we all, trees, they die, they become dirt. Bury a cat and come back several months later, try to dig it up, sometimes you find a bone, and sometimes you don't even find that, nothing. It's completely gone, even the bones. Sometimes the bones are left. Again, why he did not want that taught to youngsters, I don't know. That's why I included that in my paper. And nobody, maybe one or two of you might have caught on, but nobody seemed to catch on. Hey, that's exactly what life is made of, folk. Whether you want it taught in the schools or not. All right. Let's see. Here, I got a few of them here. Oh, yes. One of them, there was one I threw in, Minerva. Minerva was not the goddess of fertility. A few of you caught on to that. I mean, I named some names, and some of the names were goddess. Venus was a goddess of sex, fertility. So was Isis. So was Inanna, Minerva, goddess of wisdom. Most of you apparently did not do the extra research to catch that. Oh, yes. I'll agree. Sir Lancelot is not necessarily a historical figure. St. George, some of you seem to think St. George is a historical figure. The last time I read about him, he might have existed and might not have. Same way as Sir Lancelot. Now, personally, folk, I suspect both of them actually existed. But Columba, extremely important, especially to me being of Scottish descent. Columba is the man who converted the Scots to Christianity. And folk, the story is that there was a dragon at one of the Scotland's lakes, and I went to Scotland once and saw a lot of lakes, huge lakes. I mean, big enough for fairly large sailboats. I mean, anyway, and there was this dragon coming up out of the water and was about to carry someone away, and Columba rebuked the dragon, and the dragon simply floated, swam harmlessly away. The man was able to get his boat across the shore in the presence of a whole lot of Scotsmen. The Scotsmen were so impressed that they spread the word about it to the rest of the fellow Scotsmen, and Scotland converted to Christianity. Again, if any of you did any research, and one fellow in another class did. Now, folk, I guess the main point I want to say before I move on, one person in the other class put, all right, when I say there is no evidence, in my own real work, I never say there is no evidence, because there's evidence for anything. Also, logically, the absence of evidence does not mean the evidence of absence. When you say dragons do not exist, in order for you to know that, you would have to be able to look at every nook and cranny and every cavern, every cave, every ocean bottom in the globe at one time. And if you could look that way and see that there are no dragons, you say, hey, there are no dragons in the world. But if you only could see half of the earth at one time, for all you know, the dragons would be hiding in the other half that you can't see. You follow my logic. Now, granted, I could look inside my dog cage and see if my dog is there or not, because, I mean, you know, I can see the whole cage, and he's, so if I don't see him, then he's not there. But it's when people say there is no conspiracy. Well, hey, you have to know that. You have to be able to see the whole world at once and know where everybody is, what everybody's doing, because the conspirators, if they exist, are going to be conspiring somewhere where you're not looking. There is no evidence. I have seen a lot of PhDs write that, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a very shallow argument. It's an argument from, again, absence of evidence does not mean the evidence of absence. One person in the other class caught on to that. Okay. And then something else, folk, about that bottom, the last line in the last paragraph. As far as science being able to explain everything, We thought around 1950, scientists believed that we just about have, we've split the atom, we just about have everything explained. Now, I want to tell you, there's two types of science. There's the practical science. Practical is where you put together a gadget and it works. But then there's theoretical science. Theoretical science involves things that we cannot really directly observe. In the field of theoretical science, folks, there's not one theory that doesn't have some compelling reason why it simply cannot be true. All of our theories have at least one, really. I mean, they're standard theories, the theories that mainstream science wants to believe. And I have read that some scientists are about ready to admit that there's some things in our universe, or some things about our existence that simply we are not going to explain. Now, about the absence of religion, I realize there may be some atheists in here. If this offends you, I'm sorry. But I want to remind you, there have been two countries in the world that have done away with religion, Russia and China. And the results leave a whole lot to be desired, starving tens of millions of people to death due to simply lack of distribution from the central authorities. Most of you probably know what I'm talking about. It did not bring about peace and harmony and did not bring about equality of wealth. Yes, okay.
But
But
if we started the world out without, or like if religion was never made, we would have never known about religion, and it would have been like, hey, like I like you. There's no reason for me not to like you. That kind of thing, and no one would ever know. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean, but
the world now is, oh, you're wearing a yarmulke? I hate you because you don't believe in Jesus. You know, like that kind of thing. Like I'm not saying everyone's like that, but I'm saying if we would have never known about religion, then we would have never found out, and it would just been. I think it would have been just peaceful living because we would have never had any idea about that.
You can't prove that. I think it would have been a whole lot of chaos. And again, from my point of view, that's what has resulted when people grow up who don't know religion. There's no basis for morality. Might makes right. Hey, you got something I want. I think I'm going to take it from you because I'm bigger than you are. And there's no moral standard to say that you can't. Okay, anybody else? Excellent discussion for early in the morning. All right, yes.
Okay. So what you said, I think that human nature, no matter what, you'll always find something not to like someone for. Because there is racism, there is classism, all that kind of stuff like that. So
there'll always be something, yeah. If it's not religion, to be something else. Yeah. It's just basic human nature. And also, there seems to be a need for us to organize ourselves into some kind of a belief system. No matter, I mean, and somebody would eventually figure out, hey, maybe what we see, and hey, the Greeks debated this years ago, maybe what we see was formed by some higher intelligence, and we are maybe a series of higher intelligence. And they, so ultimately, inevitably, religion would have been invented. All right, anybody else? Okay, we need to move on. I left off last time with Socrates. One of Socrates' more famous sayings is, give people too much freedom, and after a while they'll start to demand some kind of order. Now, I read an article it was on the internet many years ago where this man is a professor on Socrates. He says everywhere he goes, people ask him, what did Socrates really say about this? He said, I'm going to post it. So Socrates is reportedly said through Plato, Socrates wrote nothing that we have. He said that in Athens, even the animals do not obey their masters. The children do not obey their parents. The wives do not obey their husbands. What we have is chaos. The dogs do not even obey their masters. The horses don't obey their owners. We have too much freedom, and inevitably this is going to lead to people demanding that there be some kind of order, that we must have a little bit of order in the universe. And his saying is, you'll run into this sometime in your lifetime as America becomes perhaps more and more chaotic and gets more and more liberties. of the wrong kind, licentiousness, perhaps. Some people come in and demand that, hey, we have to have order. And I think that's one reason why a lot of American young people go out and join ISIS. They want some kind of order, and they see too much chaos, too much disorder in a country such as ours. After you've had a few radio antennas torn off your car, or had your mailbox knocked down by a few punk kids, after a while you say, hey, we must have some kind of order. And people begin to meet together and form even vigilante committees saying we must have some kind of order. Anyway, Socrates was tried before the Council of 500 on the charge of corrupting the youth. And again, the people were afraid, particularly after losing the war. And they lost the war to another ideology. All right, keep in mind, Athens was a democracy, lost the war to a totalitarian state. And it appeared to some of it Socrates was actually, even though he had fought on the side of Athens, that he actually had a strong admiration for Sparta and its order and its lawfulness. And they accused him of teaching values that would help to guarantee that their young people would not adopt the values of the Athenians. He was tried on the charge, convicted, and sentenced to death. I will say this, the trial was unjust, the verdict was unjust, whatever else you can say about Socrates, he didn't deserve the death penalty, but then again, you meet up with a person who always is siding against you. No matter what view you take, he can come up with an opposite one and make his case appear the better. And he would be questioning everything you did. What are your motives? Why are you going to court? Did you ever do this? Is there any chance that you yourself are wrong? And folk, after a while, I mean, we all believe that we're right, but after a while of listening to him, people got tired of him. And but they had no sooner executed him than they realized, hey, now, why did we do this? And of course, the other Greek cities began to point an accusing finger at us and said, naughty, naughty, I mean, you killed a great man, you killed a good man for no reason. Even Sparta got into the act, even Persia got into the act of condemning them. The Athenians then made Socrates into a martyr and elevated his philosophy, and they were much slower next time about killing anyone for his philosophical beliefs. Plato. One of Socrates' pupils, again, where do I start? Plato is famous, among other things, for his right triangle of 30 degrees, 60 degree, 90. Now, if this is a 90-degree angle, and this is 30, and this is 60, if the base is 1, the 1 would be foot, inch, mile, what would the hypotenuse be? And this 30, 60, I mean, have any ever run into this Plato's triangle in geometry class? In this case, if it's a 30, 60, 90-degree triangle, the hypotenuse will be twice the length of the base. If this is 1, this will be 2. Again, don't worry about this. I just thought I'd throw it in. Plato dealt with geometry also, even as did Euclid. He's famous for another saying, and folk, I had to quote this. Most of you probably can tell my penmanship is bad. Most people who've been through 5 or more years of college have bad penmanship. Now, I was called on to teach penmanship to 10-year-old students one time, 5th graders. All I could say to them was, and I quoted Plato, do as I say, but don't do as I do. One of Plato's more famous morality quotes, teaching his Athenians, do as I say, but don't do as I do. Now, it is believed that Plato went to Egypt and learned a lot from the Egyptian initiates. He is famous also for his theory of government. He believed in the best government would be a republic. In other words, not a democracy. The difference between a republic and a democracy, in a democracy everybody votes. In a republic, only a few highly chosen representatives vote and make the laws. In other words, he believed in a government by the very best of people who would be chosen, picked, and they were to be the ones who would govern. One of his more famous writings was a writing about the republic. He did not believe in democracy, again, partly because democracy had condemned Socrates. He said democracy, you get a mob of people together, get the right orator in front of them, and you can persuade them to do just about anything. He's also famous for giving us the story of Atlantis. He learned it from the Egyptians. According to him, Atlantis had a very, very super high civilization. It was a race of titans, in other words, a race of giants. And they had started out to conquer the world. And the Egyptians told Plato, you Greeks don't remember, you Greeks were the ones who moved in and stopped him. And then after the Titans or the Atlantean people were stopped from conquering the world, the continent of Atlantis fell into the sea and has been lost ever since. Now, again, you can believe what you want to. There have been many books written about Atlantis, many places. Some people believe it was the island of Crete. It was overrun by a tidal wave. The island of Thera that also was overrun by a tidal wave, even worse than the island of Crete. Some people believe, according to Plato, it lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, no, beyond the Rock of Gibraltar. And the word Atlantic Ocean comes from the name Atlantis. And some people believe that Atlantis lies just off the coast of North America. The city of Atlanta, named after Atlantis also. Again, we don't know what we believe about this. The idea that the farther back you go, the more advanced you get, that's in keeping with what I believe about humanity and humanity's origins. Did Atlantis ever exist? The Vedas mention a highly advanced civilization also that might have been Atlantis. You'll run into the Vedas, the writings of the Vedas, when you do your next project. For those of you who came in late, the next project is now on my college. All right. The other thing Plato believed, he believed that women were equal to men, that women should have an equal share of government along with men. And again, this was highly contrary to what the Greeks believed at the time, who generally believed that a woman's place was in the home. Now, from this comes the word Platonic. Plato believed that men and women could associate with each other as friends without becoming lovers. I must throw in here, folks, along these same lines. Like we believe Socrates was, Plato was homosexual, as was also Aristotle, who we'll talk about next. Whether or not men and women can associate as friends for any length of time, each of you can decide for yourself. I will say this, most young women seem to believe, I think that men and women can be just friends and nothing else. But then I've seen women, as they get older, they eventually realize that men and women think with different sides of their brains. And folk, in my view, and if any of you want to contest, you can. I can't prove it. In my view, men and women cannot be just friends and nothing else. Sooner or later, you're going to clash so hard you'll have to separate. When you're unmarried, if you want to be married, you have to make friends with members of the opposite sex. But most of the friendships you form with members of the opposite sex are not going to last very long. Either going to end in a big blow up, a big fight, or end when one of you just quietly walks away, unless it ends in romance permanently. Unless you're brother and sister, or mother and son, or father and daughter, you cannot form a lifelong friendship with someone of the opposite sex. Now, if any of you want to agree with that, you can. There have been a few exceptions down through the ages, but mostly we now believe that men and women think differently. Again, nobody wants to comment? All right. Yeah.
Here are a couple of examples. Can you give us a couple of examples?
Well, all right, for instance, John Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI for many, many years, about 40 years, I heard a lot about him growing up. He had a female friend who they remained friends all their lives, and when he died, she supposedly confiscated all his personal records and shredded them, all this. But then again, there have been rumors that he was a transvestite and rumors about his sexual orientation also. Generally, if you find a case, okay, and I'll tell you something else, spoken. You young women, if you want to get married, you might pay attention to this. All right, one of my classmates went after one of the professors the college was going at. He was unmarried, so it was and she went after him for 40 years and never got him. And I warned my daughters about this, and my son too. And I had a male friend of mine one time, many years ago. He was a few years older than me, but we coached basketball together. He said he went after this same woman for 9 years and finally gave up on her. She never married. But during that time, he went from being a young-looking man to a middle-aged man and lost his attractiveness. In the meantime, this woman I'm thinking about, she's about a year younger than I am, and she has lost all of her ability to attract men. You have to set your limits, folk. If someone doesn't respond to you, and I wish someone would tell me, I was 39 when I was married, first married. And yes, I made my share of mistakes. And folk, it was my fault. I'm not saying I was wise enough to wait, even though my marriage has lasted some 26 and a half years. And I'm old enough to be my children's granddaddy. And I've been called that too, not by my children, but some of you, you're their grandfather. I generally don't argue. The worst thing you can do is stay in a relationship that's not working year in and year out and year in and year out over and over again. So I hope that answers your question. Give you some examples. If you want to stay in chasing after somebody who's unavailable, it probably is going to fail. If it hasn't worked after 3 or 4 months, move. Yes.
Thank you.
About men and women being friends, I think men and women can be very good friends, but it's quite often if both of them are already in a relationship with someone else, or I think it's difficult for two singles to be good friends, unless there's some type of history. Like I had a very good female friend. But we grew up together, so
I understand that.
It's a different dynamic.
I understand that. Anyway, do you have anything? Now, I'll tell you about growing up together. I had a college classmate that I met here 3 years ago after I have not seen in 40 years. Ran into her and said, well, there's this man, and she named the same class, the person in the same class. We knew each other when we were in church together. When we were 3 years old, we went to the same elementary school, the same high school, then went to the same college. We were 16 years of school. Then on our graduation, he went back home and I was married. I've not heard from him since, and what happened to him since, it ended, permanently ended. But they grew up together and were together from the time they were 3 to the time that they were about 22 when they both graduated. She graduated married, he graduated unmarried, but he went back home and she never heard from him again. This is what often happens to these friendships. I'll tell you this much. I have hardly anything to do with anyone I knew in high school. Rarely, ever, except that one of my sisters married one of my high school classmates. Other than that, hardly anything. And I have almost nothing to do with anyone I knew in college. And the people. What's that?
Friends here.
Yeah, these friendships you form. You wind up getting a different routine. I retired from Lockheed, and I have almost nothing to do with anyone I knew at Lockheed. Occasionally I see one of them. But something else, and I'll tell you, you haven't noticed this yet. Up until the time you're 30, you meet somebody outside, you recognize them. when you start turning 30, some people change a little bit and some a lot. When you start turning 40, more people change. By the time you be 50, you don't recognize your classmates anymore. They have to identify themselves to you. You won't know them. I mean, okay, all right. In December, I walked up to a high school classmate. I mean, up in Ohio. He did not know me. I had to identify myself. I would not have known him either. I don't look the way I did in high school. But most of you probably do. All right. We better leave that and go on. All right. Now, next, I'll probably think of a whole lot more to say about Plato when we get out, and I probably will. Moving on, Plato taught Aristotle. Now, the main thing Plato was remembered for down through the ages, I have to say this now because was Plato believed that the world we're living in is but a shadow of what he called an ideal world, his philosophy of idealism. In this world, automobiles rust out and wear out, but of course they had no automobile. In the ideal world, you get a new car and hundreds of years later the car would still be just as brand new as it always was, would never need an oil change, the tires would never wear out, the brake line would never need replaced. That'd be the ideal world, the upper story world of idealism. Famously, the ideal chair would be a chair that would always fit you and would never get old, never break, never crumble. And in the ideal world, nobody would ever grow old. We'd always remain in perfect health, no sickness. Aristotle rejected Plato's idealism, and there's a famous painting showing the two men arguing. Plato with his left hand pointing toward heaven saying the solution to our existence is here, and Aristotle saying no, the solution to our existence is here. Now folk, what you have is a progression from the more spiritual to the more mundane that we see in the modern world. Socrates, folk, was one of the most, he's been called a free thinker, but he actually was one of the most spiritual-minded men who ever lived. A man who claimed to be buddy-buddies with a demon, and suppose he went to the palace of this demon and saw this demon in the biggest palace, brightest colored palace he'd ever seen, and were waited to by a whole lot of attendant servants. But you can't say that he was not spiritual. Plato, whose mind was set on the ideal heavenly things, then you get to Aristotle, no, the spiritual doesn't matter. What matters is our mundane existence here on earth. Again, we do not know if Aristotle even believed in the gods. Plato did. Socrates obviously believed in some kind of spiritual. Now, Aristotle is famous for some of his writings. He wrote an encyclopedia that unfortunately sat in a basement for 200 years. When somebody finally dug it up and opened it up and said, hey, this is great, this man knew a lot. But he, among other things he tried to write about every field of science and every branch of knowledge. And in the field of taxonomy, he classified animals, but he classified them differently from what we do. And I don't know if he even knew where this would lead, but he classified animals according to animals that laid eggs or animals that gave birth. Now, some of you may know the field of taxonomy can become one big, real mess as you go along. Particularly, you may know that there are some fish that bear live young, and some fish that lay eggs. In the area of mammals, there are some mammals, and that they're warm-blooded and have fur, but some mammals lay eggs. And most mammals bear their young live. Almost all birds lay eggs. Among reptiles, most reptiles lay eggs, but some don't. Again, he would also classify animals according to whether or not they flew. Therefore, he put the bird and the bat in the same classification because the bat had wings and flew. The bird has wings and flew. But then again, what about the bumblebee and the butterfly? They have wings and fly, but they should go in the same classification. It may sound silly, but the fact is, you get in studying taxonomy today, you'll find that there are a lot of situations where that scientists will run into an animal that they don't know where to put it. It has this characteristic, makes it belong in this class, but that characteristic in that class. You have fossilized birds where the birds actually had teeth. No living bird today has teeth. You have some mammals that have ducks, called the duckbill, that have beaks like a bird, called the duckbill. Any of you ever heard of these phenomena? Yeah, one of you is nodding your head. Until it's really difficult, classifying animals becomes a really difficult art, and some of the classifications biologists will admit are purely arbitrary. This is especially true of the salmon fish. Some salmon fish are just placed in a certain class because we don't know where else to put them. But anyway, he classified animals based on their habits. And there's one more thing I'll say about Aristotle, and I'll quit. Even a 10-year-old can tell you when you teach it to them that if you drop two rocks, one of them weighs 100 pounds, the other one weighs a half a pound, and drop them, which one is going to land first? What's that? They're both going to fall at the same speed. Now, Aristotle observed a feather and concluded that lighter objects fall slower than heavier objects. As a result of what he said, some astronauts took a feather on a moon and dropped a feather in a moon rock, and the feather fell as fast as the moon rock. They've done this for vacuum, and if they've pumped all the air out and put a man in a spacesuit, he dropped a feather and a rock. The feather falls like a rock in a vacuum. Aristotle was simply wrong,